forward. Please come forward. I mean, these people are late, but you see, people are so stupid. They think it's very hot. This is actually the coolest place in London by a long way. Come forward. Yes.
That's because you're here.
And you're hot, which means you're balanced out.
Start as we mean to go on.
Who is here for the first time? Okay, well, please come back. You see, we've got lots of other people. We've got Nicholas Sirota on Thursday, Andrew Ma on Friday, Nicholas Parsons, who's 92, going on 93 on Monday. If you come, we might have a fun, just a minute show. The Duke of Marlborough, Julian Fellows, Mary Testina, and Kirsty Young. So very good people, I hope. And anyway, now, we're very lucky to have Hannah Rothschild today. And the format is very simple. I'm going to have a conversation with her for about 15 or 20 minutes, and then I'm going to let you ask her questions. The whole point of these forums is to allow you, general public, people who don't know who you are completely ordinary, so that you can interact with our guest speaker who has done extraordinary things in their lives. Now, the name Rothschild is so well known, and for those of us who know, it's very sophisticated because you're not flashy. I mean, you are flashy in the sense that, you know, you have a Chateau Lafite, you have Chateau this, Chateau that, and it's got Rothschild written all over it, and you have Waddesdon, you have chateaus, you have the most incredible Spencer House, all these things. But you never find your name in the rich list because everything is in trust and is very low profile. And Jacob, your father, who is the head of the family, is very low profile himself. And you are even much lower profile. You also, I know, are very much concerned about the welfare of the world because you're great philanthropists. And I've read that Jewish families, in particular, the Rothschilds, always give away 10% of your EBITDA, I suppose, not the assets, but whatever you increase. You're involved with charity foundations within the Rothschild family. Can you tell us whether you do actually give away 10%?
I hope that question might go on a bit longer, actually. I was getting quite relaxed. Actually, we give away more.
Oh,
quite a lot
how
more.
much? 15?
Well, I know Jacob's given away a lot. I should say a third to a half.
Of the income?
Of his fortune. And
fortune? Hold on,
yeah.
1 minute. If you gave away your fortune, 15% or 20% a year, you finish in 5 years.
Well, no, I'm saying thus far.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
he's 82.
Yes.
No, I think on principle, it's not just the Jews who do it. Actually, it's the Muslims do it as well. It's maybe it's that part of the world, but it's incumbent on both religions, as far as I know.
We Chinese don't do it.
No, well, yeah. Why China's #1 growing economy now in the world.
Yes.
But yes, and I think it's a very good, it's a good way to live, isn't it? Don't you think?
Yes,
You
and that's why you
give
leave
away
your
a lot.
legacy. That's why I suppose the name Rothschild perpetuates itself, because here and there you always see the name, and there are causes which are helped.
Well, funny enough, actually, it's not quite true, because up until extremely recently, we would always give anonymously.
Do you?
Yes, always. And actually, most of the things we do are anonymous. But recently, there's been a slight change because people suggested that if we use the name, it might encourage others to do the same. But actually, the vast majority of the things we do are below the radar.
Below the radar in the sense that somebody knows, but it publishes
anonymous.
as anonymous.
I mean, in terms of philanthropic giving, not in terms of other activities.
How much work do you do in that respect in a charity or foundation? I mean, every year you sit on probably 2 or 3 of these things, and how do you decide what to give, and how? And you always try to make it anonymous. although when you say extremely recently, you're talking about in the last...
In the last 5 to 10 years.
10 years,
yeah.
you tend to use... Which was the biggest project that you've given non-anonymously in the recent years?
So in this country, I'd say that at the moment the biggest project is the Illuminated Bridges, and this is a project which we are going to light all the bridges from Tower Bridge to Albert Bridge.
17 of them.
17, exactly. It's a 6-mile long. It's the biggest public art project, we think, in the world. And it's an idea which originated from an idea that Jacob had, which is to light one bridge. I thought, why one? Let's do 17. Let's do the
16
whole of
because
London.
Albert Bridge is already lit.
Exactly. So you go, and then you're really, what you're doing is you're transforming the heart of London, which at night the Thames becomes this dark and gloomy place. And you give it light. So you turn the centre of London to a beautiful ribbon of light, which then becomes a very attractive place to go and to, to hang out.
Logistically, is it difficult? How many councils do you have to...
Well, so we're dealing simultaneously with 43 different public bodies, which I can assure you is extremely time-consuming.
So you have started this about 2 years ago?
Yeah.
And the budget for that is about...
The total budget, including all VAT and fees, is 29.6 million at this moment.
But how about the running cost?
The running cost, that's a very good question, and it's more complicated. And that we have to seek a separate endowment for, so it doesn't end up on the public purse. So not one penny of this is coming from the public purse. And the other thing that's quite, but having said that, it's still being run with City Hall and with all the local councils.
Have you got resistance, like they have met vehemently on the that green bridge?
The Garden Bridge.
The Garden Bridge.
Well, we haven't actually, because what we did, we learned from the Garden Bridge, and we set off, and the process we ran absolutely scrupulously under public procurement plans. There's something, I won't bore you because it is quite boring, but there's something called the OJEW process, nothing to do with JEW, but, and so we followed that to the letter. So I think one of the things that one of the mistakes I think in retrospect the Garden Bridge made was that they didn't bring the public with them. They presented it as a fait accompli, and I think that's something we've been incredibly careful.
So you've gone off to these 43 authorities obsequiously saying, look, listen, let's have some support. Do you think you're going to get support? And get them to go and garner support from the public in order to make it into an attractive project that people generally would advocate.
Yeah, no, it's essential that they agree that it's a good project. And there's absolutely no, that's what's happened with the Garden Bridge. They've tried to push endlessly against
So
resistance.
your money would go in, presumably, the seed money, to raising this 30 million.
Yeah, so in that case, we've put in £5 million. It was immediately matched by the Rousing family, who put in £5 million. And now I've got to raise another 20.
Yes, and how are you going to do that?
Yeah, well...
Whom have you got in mind?
After this tour.
I mean, Led Blevnik, the man of the moment who got his knighthood and gave a party the other day costing £100 million, surely he could be a very good target.
Well, it'd be marvellous if Len Blavatnik would like to
yes.
do this. Yeah,
yes.
It's a good idea.
So what's the time frame now, you think? You think he might succeed in 3 years' time?
No, we will light 4 bridges by the end of 18.
Oh, very good.
And we will light all 17 by the end of
Which
20.
are the 4 which will be
So
lit
it'll
first?
be Westminster, London, Cannon Street, and Blackfriars.
Yes, not too late, I hope.
No. Again, don't worry, because in addition to the 47 boroughs, there are also extremely active and organised defence groups. So, the Bats have a defence group, and the Flora and Fauna have a defence group, and there's a night lighting defence group, and there's a sea cucumber defence group.
Sea cucumber,
Yeah,
how's
you'd be
that?
amazed. A sea cucumber is something that normally grows in the sea, but apparently there's a particularly rare sea cucumber that grows under one of these bridges. No, I kid you not. And actually, people who defend that sea cucumber do it with great passion.
Like barnacles, which come from Norway, apparently, at Crosby, which Anthony Gormley was saying the other day, and the protectors of the Norwegian barnacles. It is extraordinary.
But actually...
But we Chinese can buy the sea cucumber. We eat a lot of sea cucumbers.
Yeah, you're responsible, I think, for actually getting rid of most of the sea cucumbers in Scotland, because they're such a delicacy in China.
Well, there it is. So
Yeah.
we can come in. We're buying off you.
No. We need that sea cucumber to stay where it is.
Right,
It's very
okay.
important that it's protected.
How about
And the
shark's
bats.
fin? We can put a couple of sharks in.
No. Sharks don't like sea cucumbers. I know there are all sorts of things I know about now which I'd never expected.
Who is designing the lighting?
So there's a guy called Leo Villarreal who did the Bay Bridge in San Francisco, who is, in my opinion, an absolute genius. And he's like a kind of present-day Monet. He literally paints with light. James Turrell said something, another great lighting artist said something which is completely politically incorrect, so you'll love it. But he said, you can take the plainest girl in the world and put the right lighting on her and she'll become beautiful.
I don't think so. Not for Gold in My Ear. I don't think you can do anything with people like Gold in My Ear. Or even Theresa May. I mean, she's getting uglier and uglier by the day. I don't know whether you noticed, but yesterday, amongst all the Muslims, because she was so keen to ingratiate herself in the public, she looked absolutely dreadful. But there it is. Perhaps you can light her.
I wasn't actually referring to anyone specific. He was talking about bridges.
Yes. I mean, Albert Speer, who was famous for lighting all the incredible lighting for Hitler, his grandson, actually, is also a lighting expert who was engaged by the Beijing Olympic Committee to plan the route between the Forbidden City and the Olympic Hall. I wondered whether you're going to get any uplights, the sort of fascist way of illumination.
I could just see the headline, couldn't you? Rothschild employs Speer. It wouldn't.
Well, it would be extraordinarily interesting. Yes. But I look forward to it. So you think all these will be lit by 2018?
Yeah. No. All by 2020. But
all by 2020.
Four by 2018. Yeah.
Who is your chairman?
I am.
Oh, you are.
Yes. Gets rid of that problem.
How many people in your committee?
Well, like everything, there's, I am the chairman, and then there are lots of people who do most of the work. So I can swan around saying I'm the chairman, but there are 4 people full-time on the committee, and then we have fantastic jurists who chose Leo, for example, Julia Peyton Jones and Ralph Rugoff and James Turrell, Michael.
And you have resisted what they did in the Garden Bridge of getting somebody like Joanna Lumley or somebody sort of famous to spearhead, or are you thinking of having somebody to represent the whole project in a high profile?
I hope that's not needed. And the other thing is that, if our total cost is 30 million and the Garden Bridge was, I can't remember what the final reckoning was, 100 and something, do you remember?
Yes, it's quite a lot.
So we are, and the other thing is that we're not, I mean, what I particularly love about, I love many things about this project, but I really love the fact that we're not actually building anything. What we're doing is kind of making an existing structure better.
But have you thought of using, those, I just bought those for my garden last week, those things that light up, that get charged by solar panel.
Solar panel. Yes, no, so everything. Yeah. We've got we've got lights which are powered by the water. As the water goes under the bridge, it then powers the lights on the bridge. So we're going to reduce the carbon footprint of all the bridges, even though we're adding, in theory, more lights. And
presumably solar panels as well.
Yeah, so there's
a minimal cost, environmentally friendly, all that sort of tedious stuff.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's quite important.
Yes. You were married to a man called William Lord Brookfield.
Oh, yeah.
Was he a lord?
Sorry. No, he was an American. They do that. They call themselves Earl and Lord and Duke, don't they?
When you met him, did you think that it was rather amusing that he should pretend himself to be an Earl?
No, he was only a Lord. I didn't manage to upgrade him.
Yes. Do you get on with him still?
Yeah, no, we have a good working relationship, I think is the way to put it.
Already.
I can do full body blushes.
Does he live in America?
No, he lives around the corner.
Oh, really?
No, actually, joking apart, it works very, very well. I think maybe our divorce works better than our marriage.
How come you divorced after only 6 years?
It wasn't my decision.
Oh, right. Okay,
Yeah.
well, there it is.
So you have to ask him that.
Yes, all right. Well, we're inviting next year to come and produce evidence. And you got 3 wonderful daughters.
Yeah.
I mean, what were they dragged off to museums when they were young,
yes,
like you were?
Absolutely. God, what else are you going to do with 3 children in London at weekend?
Yes.
My parents worked out it was quite useful. You could take us to the National Gallery, for example, And then, they could go and look what they wanted to, and the guards would keep an eye on us. And I repeated exactly the same thing. I would highly recommend it, actually. It's a form of childcare.
And are they all incredibly interested in the arts?
Poor things, they haven't had any choice. They have to be.
Yes, and I loved your comment when you were appointed the chairman of the National Gallery, and Roy Strong said something rather derogatory. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's a bit dynastic. Money drives all now. And your response was that I was a trustee for the National Gallery for 6 years before becoming chair. I applied for the role via a newspaper advertisement, and the advertisement was made by a Labour Prime Minister of the time, Gordon Brown. To become chair, I went through a competitive process. An appointment was made by the present Prime Minister, David Cameron. Not sure how nepotism ever comes into it. So you were a bit hot under the collar.
It was surely pompous, that reply, wasn't it?
No, well, in fact, it was even more pompous from somebody else, Nick Fraser, who said that they are lucky to have people as intelligent as Hannah when the British examination is full of dunderheads. So were you really pleased?
What, by Nick's reply?
No, yes, but the fact
that
but you were able to, refute all this charge of nepotism and so forth, and you must be enjoying your job.
It's great.
What's the most interesting thing that you do for the National Gallery?
That's a very difficult question.
I mean, in a year, which is the day when you wake up and say, I'm really looking forward to tonight?
Oh, whenever we open a new exhibition, because I think the exhibitions, personally, I think they do absolutely stellar exhibitions. So the morning that you open a new show, there's obviously trepidation, because a lot depends on what the press says. But I feel just unbelievable kind of pride to be involved in that team, which pull off these, Leonardo or Goya or Caravaggio or Michelangelo. It's an extraordinary thing to be able to do that. Yes. So that gives me huge pride. And I think being part of that team of clever people is,
Do you think that Caravaggio was a bit disappointing?
But no, I didn't actually. But
No?
I would say that, wouldn't I?
Yes.
No, I thought Caravaggio, why didn't you like it?
Well, it was in the basement, and there were sort of one or two works and so forth. I was slightly, it was blown up to be, Caravaggio. You sort of start rushing to it and so forth. But do you get disappointed when you don't have as many visitors as you might expect?
Well, we've got a situation at the moment, for example, with a Michelangelo show. There's a week to go, so you don't have to miss it. And that I expected would shoot the lights out. I thought that there would be queues around the block to try and get into that exhibition. As it happens, it hasn't done particularly well. And that's mystifying. You think, why hasn't it done so well? Because it's, there will never, ever be another Michelangelo show, ever. It's not possible. And so you think, well, what is it about Michelangelo that hasn't quite captured him? It's twinned with somebody called Sebastiano. It's quite an academic show. But you don't understand why some work and some don't work. Is it a zeitgeist? What is it? I'm not sure.
Yeah. But the numbers for visiting the National Gallery is still going up?
Yeah, we have 6.2 million last year, which is the second highest ever, which makes us the fourth most visited museum in the world, which is not bad for a tiny building in Trafalgar Square.
Yeah. And were you ever associated with the National Portrait Gallery next door?
No.
Yeah.
You were at the Royal Academy, weren't you?
Yeah, Royal Academy. That's
Do you want to answer that?
22 years.
Yeah.
And it hasn't changed very much. But the National Portrait Gallery is also very popular.
Yeah.
That centre at Trafalgar Square is tremendous. Do you have a grand office inside the National Gallery?
Goodness, no. That would horrify the people in the National Gallery. My dad was also chairman for a bit, and he tried to move his office in, and they moved him straight out. And that was the day before emails, and Neil McGregor once said that he got 34 handwritten notes from Jacob in one day. Yeah, that's quite something. So, I think it's very, very important that the chair knows that they should back off,
Was that because you were part of the team, as it were, before you became chairman?
I think that's partly it, but I think also it's much clearer now about what the role of a chairman should be. So it's whereas when Jacob was chair, the roles were more blurred. But now it's very clear that you're there to set strategy and you're there to hold them to
When you
account.
set strategy, do you discuss what you have to do in an innovative way? Because the world is moving so fast, changing so fast, and you've got to address, obviously, the audience of the young, as we have experienced in the last election, being conscious of the fact that if you want to garner support in the populace, you have to address yourself to the young. I'm talking about the 17 to the 25. Do you talk about that endlessly as to how to attract and use the National Gallery to leapfrog into something which is not been done traditionally and completely change about the way in which you want to attract audience?
Yeah. No, very much. It's one of the kind of most important topics. And the way we're going to do it is to build, alongside the physical museum in Trafalgar Square, we're going to build a digital museum so that anybody can basically access the National Gallery at any time of day.
On their phone?
Yeah, wherever they are, they'll be able to get there. And I think the digital museum, we can think about programming and we can think about apps, we can think about things which will appeal to a younger audience.
Have you digitized everything?
Yeah. Yeah, so everything on that we own, everything is available to anybody at any time already. But it's how you present that
Have you thought about
information.
holograms? Have you thought about AI? I mean, you get in Korea and Japan now, robotic waiters and so forth. You could have curators who would take people around, I suppose.
Well, it's not actually fun enough. It's not so far-fetched, that idea.
I'm not.
No, I say
people are
it is not. It's not far-fetched at all.
I'm more intelligent than you, obviously.
Yeah, obviously.
Because I'm thinking ahead. You have to think ahead because everything is changing so fast. I mean, if we look in the last 10 years, the amount of technicality that has actually intruded our lives and enhanced our life in a way is going to be crying out. I mean, I look at every single institution in the world now, you know, academic institutions, whether it be museum, the music academies. I mean, all these people, I say to them, they've got to get out of the box and start thinking in a very, very innovative way.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that must be
No,
very
it's
constant.
absolutely true. So, for example, one thing you'll be able to do soon is take your telephone, put it up against a painting in the National Gallery, and it will tell you, for example, where that painting was painted, who painted it by, who it was owned by, how much it would be worth on the open market.
Thank God, because you can't read anything. I can't read anything at the moment. There's a tiny little plaque. And you've been perpetuating that for hundreds of years, like all the other museums. It is absolutely pathetic.
Well, there was, I think, a sense that in the past that you should make your own mind up about it. You should have a physical, emotional reaction to a painting in front of you. And that it was kind of slightly infra-dig to say, right, this is who it's by or this is where it was. And that was seen as kind of not really kind of intellectual enough. And luckily that's changing, because I completely agree with you. I like knowing the backstory.
In fact, when you first were dragged around the museums, one of your complaints was that they didn't really speak to you in some way when you looked at it.
That's right.
You wanted more.
Yeah.
You wanted to know more before you can connect with the painting. And that information is very, very important. But also, why can't they write in simple English? I mean, you know, like program notes, it's all gook, passive voice, and why can't people write simple language? And I think that going down to the vernacular has got to be the priority of every institution, because politicians, they don't speak simply. And I think Trump won because he brought the political language to the lowest denominator. You've got to have script, which I think a sun reader should be able to understand. The white van driver, she doesn't agree, but she's wrong, of course. When we ask her for a question, we're going to scrutinize her grammar, her wording, her vocabulary to see whether it's right or not. But do you not agree?
Yeah, completely. And it's also much harder to write in understandable, plain English than it is to write and speak.
But what
We know
gets
that.
me about these galleries that they don't give you the context. You know, it says this was written, this was drawn by Michelangelo in 1645. It doesn't tell you what was happening to his life. It doesn't tell you what was happening around him at the time, the context, the social context, and so forth. These are very important aspects which we all need to learn to bring the painting alive.
Yeah, I agree with you. I also think that the technology hasn't existed up until now to do it. Otherwise, you would have had a kind of Tower of Babel with somebody who didn't want to know about where Michelangelo was born, you know, that was being on a kind of loudspeaker around you. But now, because of iPhones and everything else, you can absolutely do that. So you will be able to have a personalized tour. You'll be able to say, I'm interested in Michelangelo's love life, for want of a better, I'm sure.
So here it is, your second subject, after your prize-winning book, Improbability of Love, which is all about this rather seedy art world, that perhaps in the second novel you can try to extrapolate some of the lessons to be learned. I mean, is a seedy sort of environment. Has it gone seedier since you wrote it?
The art world?
Yes.
Well.
It's unregulated.
It is extraordinary.
Your family buys, possesses paintings and so forth, and you wrote it, I mean, not tongue-in-cheek, but it was, you know, very flowery and so forth. And how much truth do you ascribe to that?
To the satire of the art world?
Not the satire, the rottenness beneath the veneer of respectability.
Oh, listen, I would write a passage, and I would think, I'd put my pen down, or, you know, metaphorically, and I think I've gone much, much, much too far. And then I would go to a sale room, and then I think, I haven't gone nearly far enough. And I'd have to go back and rewrite. No, I should have gone much further. I'm teased, actually, by people in the art world by how vanilla it is compared to what really goes on.
Well, but do you think there's any hope?
For the art world?
Yes, to improve.
I don't think it wants to, does it?
You're still seeing the banking sector. I mean, you see people being prosecuted now. Will you see people being prosecuted in the art world?
I can't answer that question because I suppose if they, well, there are people who are prosecuted, yes. I mean,
yeah, I mean, they went to jail. I mean, Taubman.
Yeah.
I mean, the funny thing was that he was accused of being colluding with Christie's on the price when the premium was 12.5%. And the pretext was that, you know, that was antitrust. Now we pay 20 and 25%. You should have left the bugger alone, and the premium wouldn't have gone up.
But the thing is, David, is that the value of a work of art is linked to desire. And it's just desire. You know, some of it's, there's a little bit of provenance, there's a little bit of what somebody paid for it the week before, but really, when it comes down to it, you pay for that pen how much you really want it. And that's a very dangerous cocktail. Because as we know, when desire gets involved, you know, people's moral system, gets out of whack. And I think that's partly what happens.
What's your greatest desire today?
God, I walked into that one, didn't I? Well, I could say all the all normal things like I want my children to be happy and et cetera.
First of all, will you remarry? Have you found?
No, I haven't. One lives in hope.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think I'm a bit long in the tooth now. Though.
But I mean, do you find at night that
you
wouldn't mind?
God, where are we going here? Thank you, Millie. Thank you, Steady. We got a bit. Where's an offer here? Anyway, any others?
I mean, yeah, but when you go to bed and you say, "I've done all these things," I can hear you almost. I'm quite satisfied with what I've achieved and so forth. I've done well, and I enjoy what I do and so forth. And then you look round, and the room is empty.
I think, thank goodness, I can get a good night's sleep.
Yeah, very good. Now, your father is an extraordinary character. Do you speak to him almost every day?
Yeah, I work in the next door office. I see him literally. I've just.
You work in Spencer House?
Yeah.
Well, yes.
Yeah. And then if we're not there, then the whole kind of, shtetl moves down to Waddesdon.
Yes.
And
so
there's no escape.
There's no escape. Well, I mean, that's... Now, I was most fascinated of your life by the incident where you were told to go and see a clairvoyant called Ivy. Oh, and you thought you'd gone mad, but at the time, you had a bit of perhaps depression or whatever, and you went to see this woman in God knows where, and you got a speeding ticket for going to see her in order not to be late. And she looked at a crystal ball, apparently, and said that you are going to see a field of violets, and then you're going to be inspired into writing a novel, and that will sell millions. And you thought it was a complete nonsense, and paid her £30 and went home. And bingo, soon afterwards, you were in Cornwall and you saw a field of violets, and you said, I'm going to write a book.
Yeah, that's true.
And you wrote the book, and it sold thousands and
Hundreds
tens
of
of
thousands.
hundreds of thousands, being translated into 6 languages.
12.
Won a prize. 12.
Yeah.
Fucking read Wikipedia. I'm going to complain. I mean, are you astonished by that?
Amazed. I mean, well, the Ivy thing was it's slightly embarrassing and very amazing. I mean, you don't. I promise. I did go to SW 999 to see this woman, and she had. It was a perfectly normal terraced street, and then in the middle of the terraced street there was a tiny black cottage. It was very peculiar, and I knocked on the door, and it was opened by a wizened lady wearing big hoop earrings, into a room painted black, hung with crucifixes. At this point, I thought, that's it. I'm never getting out of here alive. And she did have a crystal ball, absolutely true. And I thought, I am such an idiot. And it really cheered me up because I was, you're quite right, I was slightly depressed at the time. And it was one of those things where it makes you laugh at yourself because you think you're such an idiot. And she said, the first thing she said, oh, shit, your love life is a disaster. And I thought, I didn't have to pay anyone 30 quid to be told that. And then
Did you ever tell her afterwards that what she told you was...
No, I was much too frightened. And
You
besides,
haven't met her
no,
again?
I can't possibly go to SW 999 again anyway with my speeding ticket. But no, I'm too scared to go back because it was weird actually. It was kind of, the field of violets was one of the most uncanny things. So when somebody says, you're going to look down and you're going to see a whole purple field, you do think, oh, come off it. And I was literally walking and I looked down and the whole hillside was purple. It was quite odd.
And then you said, I'm going to start writing my
Well,
novel.
no, because she said to me, she said, you're going to write a novel, it's going to sell hundreds of thousands, and you're going to call the heroine Annie. And I'd always wanted to write a novel, but I'd never had the guts. And when I saw The Field of Violets, I thought, okay, why
Well, I
not?
thought that was extraordinarily good and wonderful. But then, the next thing I read was that you were fascinated by Peter Mendelssohn.
Mendelssohn.
I mean, in what way did your mind go mad enough to be fascinated by
Well, actually, it was
a
before,
rather...
incidentally. Yeah,
what?
anyway, go on. No, actually, I got fascinated by him before, just so you know,
Before?
just in the chronology.
You said that you learned from him because he never closed any doors and he always was very flexible. And so, well, not surprising because he was a greaseback. and he wanted to make sure that he had it both ways and so forth. And he never really was a Labour peer. And the extraordinary thing was that he'd never been in the countryside until he was about 42, which is extraordinary. And I just don't understand how somebody as intelligent, although because you were gullible enough to listen to Ivy, the clairvoyant, you were seduced by Peter Mendelssohn. Were you slightly attracted to him physically? Like Mrs. Thatcher to Parkinson, say?
I can absolutely assure you I was not. Okay,
I know
is
that
one
he is
thing.
homosexual, but
Yeah,
nonetheless...
No, I find homosexuals, some of them quite attractive, actually.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
So-
they won't respond, does that?
No, they
That's the
don't
only
respond.
problem.
Yeah, I've tried.
Do you still rate him? I mean, he's gone into sort of oblivion.
Well, I don't think he'd agree with you.
Yeah?
No. I do actually, fun enough. I think I come off it. In the politics today, don't you rather miss Peter Mendelssohn?
No, I mean,
Oh, I
just
see.
as I don't miss that ghastly man who was even more ghastly, the press secretary, what's his
Alistair
name? Alistair Campbell, who talks absolute rubbish. But there it is. Those are the bare right years which consisted of governments who only read the press and didn't really rule. But anyway,
I think
I'm very
Mendelssohn.
glad.
No, Mendelssohn. I mean, funny enough, it's fine, strange defending him, but actually, I think he's clever, and I think that he's a pragmatist, and I think he did a lot of, he did quite a lot of quite interesting things, and we need those figures behind the scenes
Well, he's
to
very
make
loyal.
things work.
He was very loyal.
I don't have to be loyal to him. Actually, I do genuinely think he had tremendous abilities.
In fact, it was a trap question because I rather like Peter.
So thank goodness me, I came out of it
For the
okay.
record, it was a trap question.
Okay,
Yeah.
few avoided.
And then you said you met Corbyn and you didn't like him at all.
No, I didn't meet. I've never met Corbyn.
You said,
No, I said I don't. I said there are things about. I don't think he should be prime minister. I think is what I said.
why do you think the Labour Party is full of anti-Semitism?
No, I don't think Labour Party is full of anti-Semitism. Corbyn has said some anti-Semitic things. That's that's on record.
In
So is
what
Ken
way?
Livingstone.
I mean, yes.
So I don't. I mean, I'm personally very pro people being, not anti anything.
But
within reason.
why should you or any Jew be more sensitive about people being anti-Semitic when other races get it? We Chinese get it, the Muslims certainly get it, and all the other people. But that's the way in which the world is.
But do you think we're more sensitive?
Much,
Or are
much
we
more
better
sensitive. It's
organised about our
because I think the
sensitivity?
Holocaust came at a time when, for the first time in history, people saw things on films and photographs much more. I mean, you know, throughout the world we've had absolute horrors preceding the 20th century and so forth. And of course I'm not anti-Semitic, of course I'm not a racist and so forth, but I think that there is something extra sensitive about the Jews wanting to claim the highest moral ground in terms of ethnic prejudices.
I don't think they do. See, that's where we disagree. I think that, and I'm not saying in any way that the Holocaust was the worst of all worst. I think it was I think it's got to be up there, if you like, using kind of basic parlance. But, and I think obviously I don't disagree the fact that it was filmed and photographed so extensively and, you know, means that it's less forgettable. But I don't think the Jews...
But everything that's happened to you has happened to every other race.
But I never said it wasn't.
What?
And who said it hadn't?
Yeah, so I mean, I always find it's a very extra sensitive issue, which I don't understand.
What, anti-Semitism?
Yes, I mean, of course I don't, as I said, I don't agree with it, but it's somehow much more sensitive than, you know, if I was called a chink, it's just about okay. But if you were called a fat Jew or something, is not okay. But I just wanted to know, you know, what you thought about that.
No.
And how about Theresa May? What do you think of her?
Moving swiftly on. Well, I think she's very
a robot?
No, I think it's very disappointing. I thought the first speech she made when she got chosen as leader, I thought the first speech was excellent, and I thought it really, you know, she was someone I had great hope at that moment. Unfortunately, I think since then she's done gradually knocked away the bricks of credibility, you know, and she doesn't seem to put a foot right at the moment.
No.
Would you agree with that?
Yes, quite. Sorry. Let's have some questions. Who's got a question? Yes, here we are. Yeah.
Thank you. Since you're part of the art world, and you are from a family which has got strong ties to Europe, what's your favorite museum in Europe, so outside of the United Kingdom?
Oh, good question. I love the Prado. I think the Prado has got fantastic things in it, and I think it's a manageable size. We just went with the gallery to Dresden, and actually the pictures in Dresden are marvellous. Do we count the Hermitage as being part of Europe? Is Russia Europe? Yeah? Okay.
Dresden, the porcelain.
Yeah, well, the combination of the porcelain, the paintings, and the Wunderkammer, I think all that is amazing. So, I mean, actually, funny enough, I think it's quite hard to choose, but I think there's an embarrassment. What's your favourite one? Yeah. The Wallace, yeah, it's a beautiful, yeah.
Hi.
I agree. Hello.
Just here. So it's about art. So I've been to every single major fair and biennale in the world, and the question seems to be, how much is it? Instead of, what is the soul behind the work and what is the soul in the work? So at Art Basel last week, I was looking at an Agnes Martin at Pace. I just dropped my heart. It was so beautiful. And then as soon as I asked, how much is the piece, $6.5 million, it sort of kills the energy of the piece. Will we ever shift from the question, how much is it, to how does it touch me?
I think it's a lovely question. I mean, Robert Hughes said, today everybody knows the price of the work of art, but nobody knows its value. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. I think what I would suggest is if you go to museums where they can't sell anything and therefore things are absolutely valueless, I would stick to museums and avoid art fairs at all costs. And then you won't be confronted with that issue.
I mean, just don't ask. I mean, you don't have to possess it to like it. I mean, I've loved 100,000 paintings, which I can't afford. In fact, you have a theory that you don't begrudge people wanting a yacht or spending millions and millions. In fact, you think they're stupid when they're buying, paintings and so forth, because presumably your theory is that you don't need to own them. Isn't that right?
Well, everyone here is British, owns all the pictures in public collections. So pictures in the National Gallery and Tate and everything belong to everybody who's British. So in a way, everyone here who's a Brit owns
those
them.
who pay tax.
And everyone who isn't a Brit who's in London can go and see them for free. So you don't need to buy them. I don't begrudge anyone buying a picture, just as long as they leave it to a public institution or show it.
Yeah. That one and then at the back.
What's your favorite picture in the National Gallery? And coming from where David was going before about the social context, I think that's always something I look for when I'm looking at pictures in the National Gallery. I want to know the surroundings about the people and what they thought and how they were different. So is that going to appear?
If we can get the technology right, which I think we can, then you will be able to have exactly that. You'll be able to get the social surroundings to a picture, so that you'll have the backstory, if you want a better answer, sorry. As for my favourite picture, that changes almost week by week. At the moment, I'm looking a lot at the Velázquez of Martha and Mary, because I like the parable. I like the fact that, do you remember, it's when Christ, Martha's complaining to Christ that Mary hasn't helped her with the washing up, and Christ said, well, you should do much less washing up, much more listening to stories. And I think, well, that's quite a good maxim for life. So I'm trying to take that one on board. Not that I do a huge amount of washing up, I must admit.
You irritatingly always hide Sargent's Carnation Lily Lily Rose. Where is it?
Actually, funny enough, it's at Tate at the moment.
Is it?
Yeah.
You lent it to Tate.
So I'm pretty have to go
Well,
there.
why? I mean, it's one of the prettiest pictures in the world, and I always come and I never find it.
Well, it's at Tate because Tate have got have got a big thing about Sargent.
Hello, I'd like to take you back, if I may. Was your mother and Nika very close growing up?
Oh, so Nika Rothschild was my great aunt, and she fell in love with jazz music, and in particular with Thelonious Monk, the pianist. And although she had 5 children and a husband, she ran away to New York in order to find Thelonious Monk. And she found him, and then they lived together for the last 30 years of his life. And she basically kind of laid her devotion at his feet and did everything he wanted. And so my mother didn't know, but my dad, no, actually I took my father to meet her because she'd gone to live in America, and so therefore we'd lost touch with her. And then when I found her, I suggested that he might like to re-meet her. So she wasn't very close to her siblings, no. What did the family think of her? They didn't disown her, and they didn't disapprove, because actually one of the great things about my family is that they're not terribly judgmental, but they were slightly mystified by why she decided to live that life in America and, eschew all the kind of comforts that she could have had here. Yeah.
Hi, Hannah.
Hi, Jemima.
Given that there have been so many brilliant Rothschild women who've been disenfranchised over the centuries, can you just tell me what you think about primogeniture?
Thanks, Jemima. Well, Rothschild women, it was laid down by N.M. Rothschild, the original founding father of the British branch, that women were only good for bookkeeping, being archivists, or bearing children. And that lasted, so no woman was allowed to be involved in the family business or in the bank. And I think I'm the first one who actually works in finance, although some might quarrel with that, what I actually do there. But, and it's extraordinary. I mean, it's an absolutely extraordinary thing how somebody in the 18th century can basically rule through the generations. I think personally that primogeniture is ridiculous. I think it's outmoded. I think the women I know are every bit as capable and brilliant as the men. And in the particular case of my family, you know, in the early part of the 20th century, it nearly finished the family because they had a lack of male heirs, but they had incredibly good women. If only they hadn't had primogeniture, I think the family would be even better and more, you know, and do even better today than it did.
Not according to Henry Keswick, but but you've got aunts who are very distinguished.
Oh yes, they are, but not in
scientists.
finance. Oh yeah,
Yes,
yeah. But they had, you know, my great aunt Miriam, who is one of the most distinguished, well, she's dead now, but was an incredibly distinguished scientist, had to self-educate. Her own education stopped age 5 with the Romans. They didn't consider it important to give her any education beyond learning about the Romans, so she had to self-teach.
But was Jacob, your father, always in favour of bringing you up as a proper, full-fledged,
Assimilated.
Yes.
Well, I think my father loves women, absolutely loves them. So I think he doesn't see any difference. I don't think between men and women.
Hannah, your family are great collectors. If one of your children, your lovely children, came to you and said, "I'd like to start collecting," what would you advise them? What advice might you give them about collecting?
Good question. I think I'd advise them to buy what they love, and I'd advise them to go and look and look and look and look and look, and then eventually you get your eye in. I personally don't collect a lot. I mean, I buy things slightly sporadically and a lot from friends. But I think that my eldest daughter, I think, is quite interested in collecting, and I think will be a very good collector because she properly looks and she goes round all her friends' art shows and everything else. I think she might be quite good.
I always tell my children, I say, if you want to collect, start buying something that you put in your bedroom so that when you wake up in the morning, you suddenly delight. Or after a while, if you don't. And if you don't, then you're not a real collector. You need to wake up to something that you absolutely love, and you say, "How lucky I am."
That's what Lucy's there for.
Yes. Well, yes. And she says, "I'm not going to be a collector." Yeah.
I just wanted to ask, do you have any plans to write another family biography about anyone else from your family?
I really, really wouldn't advise anyone to write a family biography. Yeah.
Is there anyone else that particularly?
No, there are lots of people I'd love to write about, but I think I've done it once, and I think it's more trouble than it's worth.
A sort of black sheep.
Another one, yeah. No, I think
Is there
novels.
another one? Who?
Well, I'd love to write about Miriam. I'd love to write about all sorts of people, but actually, I think novels suit me better, partly because, fact checking is exhausting. So with novels, you can make things up.
Very quickly, do you have plans to write another novel?
Thank you for asking that. Yes, I am
She
writing
just asked
another
that
novel.
question, yes.
When
I
is
am-
it going to be published?
Well, I've got to write it first. But so I'm writing at the moment, and it's actually going to. I hope it's going to be 2 books. What's it called? It's not called a trilogy. What's 2 books called?
Duality.
What's it called? I've gone blank. Whatever it's 2-parter, and it's about a family in a crumbling stately home. ... So that's where. Yeah.
Could you go through the thought process at the National Gallery of when you decided to allow photography in the gallery?
When we did, if you couldn't hear that, why we decided to allow photography in the gallery? Well, it was because basically everybody was coming in with a camera or a phone, and it became so hard and boring to try and stop everybody from doing it that it seemed, in a way, okay, do it. You obviously desperately disapprove. Okay.
Why do you disapprove?
Looking at the work of art. Yeah.
Yeah, it's because you're old. I'm
Yeah.
afraid. Just think of all the young people who snap away and go home and get excited and inspired. If you want democracy, that's where it should. You have to allow, yes. Go back tomorrow with a camera. Yes.
As you're the first female chairperson of the National Gallery, how do you feel about gender equality? Do you consider yourself a feminist?
I absolutely 100% a feminist, yes, and I would, and I'm proud of it. And I think lots of men are feminists. I think, yeah, I think it's changing the world. I think it's changing quite slowly.
Do you insist on being called chairperson?
I don't really care what I'm called, if I'm honest with you.
I think you're the chairman. I mean, I don't understand that.
I
A
don't.
very
I mean,
good
I don't
chairman.
particularly mind, but I do think it's. I think for far too long, it's been. If you that there hasn't been enough women in senior positions in the art world. If you take Julia Peyton-Jones over there, one of our heroines, I mean, for a very long time, Julia was one of the only directors and leaders of an important arts institution. Now we've got Maria Balshaw, but I think Julia must have felt quite lonely at times.
And Lord Snowdon will step down very soon for a female chairman. But you have very good. I mean, the Scotland Yard head is called Dick, Dudar Dick. She's female. Chancellor of Oxford, Professor Louise Richardson. A lot of
Come on,
women
we're in 2017. I mean, why is it taken until now?
Well, because you were slower than us. But there it is. Well, it is the social conditions, like your family and so forth. And I mean, the Muslim world, God knows how that will change eventually. But it looks as if you're knocking your head against, stone wall in a culture like that. Saudi Arabia and so forth. Certainly, China had emancipated. I mean, Mao was the greatest liberator of the female.
Yeah.
And in fact, when Yves Saint Laurent died, he was described as being the man who invented the suit for women. But of course he wasn't. It was Mao, way before him. He put suits in women everywhere. Yes. A question?
Oh, for dinner.
Yes. Dame Julia.
It's been the most fascinating discussion, and I just wanted to ask something which I find particularly testing, which is how you manage your time, particularly because you're a writer, somebody who's creative, which is an inward-looking activity. Quite apart from anything else, you're the chair of the National Gallery, which is an extraordinary responsibility, and also you are reigning supreme with your father, of course, at the foundation. Now that, quite apart from anything else, those three responsibilities, in addition to family life, friends, and so on and so on, each one would take up 24 hours a day. So how do you manage to juggle them?
Well, the flip answer is don't get a husband. They take up a huge amount of time. But the honest answer is actually I manage it because I've got incredibly brilliant people working with me. So, although it looks as if I'm doing more, actually, I'm supported by, a really first-class team of people.
And I think you are curious enough to want to have a day which is not similar to the next day.
Yeah.
And you said that what you love about your life is that every day you do something different.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's
I'm greedy, as you can probably tell. I'm really, really, really greedy. So
How much do you sleep?
I sleep quite a lot, about 6 or 7 hours. That's quite a lot. But actually, in answer to, I really, really want. I don't believe in an afterlife. I really believe this is it. I want to do as much as I possibly can in every single day, and if that means, not reading Vogue, that's not reading Vogue. So that's what it is, isn't it? If you really want to do something.
Do you address yourself with huge questions which figures centrally in your philosophy, namely that the gap between the rich and the poor is widening, and that you really do think that not governments but individuals, especially richer people, have got a greater responsibility, and that's why it underpins your advocacy of philanthropy, obviously. But the world is going in a rather dangerous way, I think you put it, because of this widening gap. So in your waking moments in bed after you brush your teeth, what do you want to do to make a difference? How do you go about solving this problem, at least making a small difference?
Well, I don't personally think I can solve the problem of incredible inequality of wealth and opportunity. because I think that's a much bigger problem than I could solve. I think that takes...
I know, but
Yeah.
you surely want to make a difference. What would you do? What do you do unconsciously and consciously to tell people that they have a responsibility, or the richer people?
I think all you can do is to try and do your absolute utmost and lead if you can by example. I mean, I think if you can, so I mean, I'd say 60% of my time probably goes on in charitable, endeavours, and a lot of that is spent fundraising. A lot of that is spent advocating about why something would be good or why something else would be good. And I think that's really all you can do.
Do you give 10% of your profits from the improbability of love? And eventually when you get the film rights as well?
Oh, I give 60% already.
60%?
Yeah. Yeah, I've given 60%.
Why not more?
Because there were a couple of other things I quite wanted to buy.
Like your orange Prada handbag.
Like my orange Prada handbag,
which
exactly.
fits beautifully.
Well,
by
it was
the way.
absolutely, as you can see,
Yeah,
this is in your honour I'm wearing this.
Yeah, is it Japanese? Or
Well,
is
actually, it is Japanese. It's made by a friend of Lucy's and mine called, what's she, Epinome? Yet Schenkman, and she's absolutely brilliant. So,
Well, you look ravenous.
but it's really, thank you. It's in your honour.
Another question?
Or can we go and have dinner?
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks, Sir David. Hi. Lady Rothschild, I hope you don't mind me asking you this question. Has anyone tried to sell the some sort of stolen art to the National Gallery? just wondering.
What, knowingly or unknowingly?
Well, I mean, if you find that someone's trying, if you find that someone has, has stolen it, what would
Yeah,
you do?
like Nazi looted art or something
Yes.
like that. Yeah. Well, until quite recently, it was quite difficult to check on the provenance or where a picture was. So indeed, I think there were many attempts by people to sell stuff. Now you have to be incredibly careful and you check and double check and everything else. In fact, you wouldn't dream of buying something. But there are one or two pictures in the gallery which have questionable provenance. And the way that we deal with it is to put them on the web and to advertise widely that it has questionable provenance. And if someone comes forward to say, this was stolen work, then you have to look at how strong their claim is. And if their claim is very strong, you would give it back. But no, you're right. I mean, I think the whole thing of where art comes from and who owns it and everything else is... But it's easier now to check. That's the good thing.
Weren't you enchanted by that film about the Klimt? I can't remember.
The Woman in
film.
Gold.
Yes.
Yeah, Woman in Gold. Lady
Do you
in
have a
Gold.
Klimt in the National Gallery?
Yeah, we do actually. Yeah, beautiful. A woman in white. It's fantastic. But that's got a fine provenance.
Good.
I'm happy to tell you.
How much value is the totality of all the works in the last count of the National Gallery?
Well, I wouldn't have a clue. And nor incidentally, I mean, this is not a thing that we widely publish. But the fact is that the paintings in the National Gallery are not insured because we couldn't possibly afford to insure them. So you couldn't possibly, they are priceless. How could you possibly insure even just the ambassadors?
Paintings in the National Gallery, like all the other national, other galleries and so forth.
Same, nothing's insured in this country. You couldn't possibly afford to insure them. So the moment they go off-site on tour, then they become insured. But no, you can't insure them. They're too valuable. They're priceless.
That is absolutely extraordinary.
Mm.
Yes.
Shocking, but true. But I mean,
so why don't you have? I mean, I don't want to be derogatory about your attendants. I mean, half of them are a bit sort of dodgy, aren't they? I mean, shouldn't you have somebody with machine guns or something? I mean, somebody can just slash a painting, which happens occasionally, and so forth. So what do you do? I mean, suddenly, you're in trouble.
Yeah, you're in trouble.
And fire and so forth. I mean, that must be terrible.
No, it is absolutely no. We have.
I hope you don't clad your gallery.
No. Don't. Actually, the room attendants are extremely highly trained in all sorts of things, including how to intercept lunatics. And there are CCTV cameras and everything else. But, it's really vulnerable. I mean,
what's the standard procedure? If somebody brought out a matchet or something, I mean, surely you can't tell the attendant to train himself to go, or her, to attack, in counterattack.
Well, it's quite interesting you say this, because the other day somebody did have a go at a picture, very recently, and I think that what happened was the attendant launched themselves out, and so did members of the public, and I think it was an instinctive reaction. You wouldn't say to somebody, put yourself in danger, or, but actually instinctively what happens is the room wardens get so protective of the paintings, and the members of the public love them, like that lady over there in white, so much that they don't want lunatics attacking them. So
no, she would say, don't take pictures.
Well, but he was, so it's interesting, the public sometimes are the greatest defenders of the work of art. And it's happened twice now. It's been the public who's protected the pictures.
Fantastic. If you were in a room, would you go and attack the attacker?
Yes, I absolutely would. I feel really passionately protective about those pictures.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good.
I hope it doesn't happen, having said that. I'm not very brave.
Well, you never know. I mean, one of the things that, we keep constantly asking ourselves, are we cowards? Are we
I know.
Yes.
What would you do in that situation?
And you never know until the moment strikes. All right, let's have one last intelligent question. Yes.
Okay, I hope it's intelligent.
Better be.
Okay, we'll try. Lady Rothschild, if...
I'm not a lady, actually, I'm afraid, so I hate to disappoint you.
Okay, Honourable Hannah Rothschild, may I say. If then in the world of multimedia, what is your vision for art, especially with photography and all of the other media forms? How do you see the future for art?
I think nothing will ever replace the physical experience and the physical excitement of standing in front of the original object. And there's nothing that media or multimedia or AI or VR or anything else can ever detract from that. But, as David said earlier, I think quite rightly, all these new technologies which are coming in can be used to help us understand, to kind of make the experience around it kind of exciting. But I think ultimately nothing will ever replace the object.
But what happens if it's dodgy?
Well, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, David, as you know.
Well, I don't believe that, but there it is. I mean, there are lots of men, friends of mine, who marry extremely ugly women, so there it is. But I mean, I just find the real pleasure of looking at a piece of art, a visual art, is the appreciation and the realization of the extraordinary talent of men, of how they manage to compose and craft an extraordinary composition that moves, people, and in the ether makes a difference in our spiritual life. And it's got nothing to do with our human reactions. It's got nothing to do with our blood or liver or whatever. It's all the brain working, and that is an extraordinary experience. And I'm so glad that you are the custodian of an institution which gives an enormous pleasure to so many people. Anyway, I'm afraid the hour is up, and I want you to please join me in thanking Hannah Rothschild.